I'm John Stahl-Wert, and along with my colleagues around the world, we're devoted to helping men and women make the biggest positive impact they can possibly make for the world through their leadership practice. One of the things that I have been paying attention to just about my entire adult life is this notion that in business and in leadership, there is what's referred to as the hard side of business. And, that's the strategy, and that's the finances, and that's the market analysis, and it's the standard operating procedures, it's the ERP system, it's everything related to the execution of the things that are being done in building or delivering or serving or solving things. And then there is the so-called soft side of business, or the soft side of leadership. And the soft side is the people side, according to the literature. The soft side is, morale and motivation and trust and, whether people feel like human beings at work and so forth and so on. And historically, now this is changing, it's very interesting, but historically, the hard side of leadership was the important side. Let's be real. When push comes to shove, we got to do that. That's the hard side. That matters. And then the soft side is it's the elective side. If you have a little extra time and maybe it's a particularly, good year for you and you've got some extra cash, you can do some things on the soft side. That is the way we've looked at it for a long, long time. And I want to reflect on this just a little bit today, stepping back from some of the practical training things that I do on this podcast and talk about the difference between these two things and talk about the kind of transformation of our thinking that is required. Because here's the deal. The soft side is hard. The soft side is measurable. The soft side is concrete. The reason, I'm sure of this, I have watched this closely, thought about this, read the books. The reason people talk about the hard side of leadership, the important things, and the soft side of leadership, not quite as sure what it is, but we know it's important surely, is that there is a lack of understanding about the power and the specificity of the behaviors that we need to get good at on the people side if we want to succeed. Somebody who's watching the numbers in the business, and if you are a good owner, you are, understands that how people get treated, how managers behave, how supervisors supervise has a powerful impact on the metrics. And I think it is a kind of a perverted mind that says that those operational things matter, and when possible, we'll pay a little attention to the people things, because the people things are just so vital. I had a conversation probably for 4 straight years, starting about 10 years ago, with an owner of an enterprise in the central part of the United States. I'm going to be very vague here. And but I've had conversations like that conversation many, many times over the years. And this leader was a good man. His company was good. They were a $25 million company. They were doing good work. He had a lot of people. And he was predisposed aspirationally. He was predisposed in terms of the sentimentality of him to like what I was teaching, serving leadership. He thought, that's good. He had reasons to believe that's good stuff. He had a hard side, soft side mentality. The business stuff he had to do. And then the nice things, he would also like to do if he could. Year after year, I sat down with this man. He had significant issues inside his profitable company. He was leaving immense profitability on the table. He had turnover issues. He had rework problems. He was spending money on the people side, and he didn't know how to fix it. He would sit down with me, and I would walk him through what we were going to do, the frameworks, the behaviors we were going to teach, the background to where we learned these things by watching the highest performing companies on earth. We're not messing around here with being nice. This isn't a be a nice leadership program. This is about performance. Walk him through it. And he had read my book, The Serving Leader. And 4 years in a row, he said, "Oh man, I like that. I agree with everything you're telling me. It's really, really good." He said, "The thing is, John, this year, I got to focus on profitability. And he was bleeding profitability on the leadership and people side. I've seen this again and again in my work with leaders. It's as though the mind is split. And over here is the business sensible things that we learn in business school. And then over here is the good human things that, if we have a chance, we're going to do those too. And in fact, these two things are entirely intermeshed. Every great company that I have observed over the years is great on the people side. I didn't say every nice company. I'm talking about outperforming, out-innovating, productive, growth-oriented, sector-leading companies that I've worked with are fantastic on the people side. But somehow that's the soft side. And I want to give you a couple of frameworks to think about this, a couple of data points. We have all kinds of hats we wear in leadership, as founder, owner, CEO, president, boss. We've got the strategy hat, and we have the marketing hat, and we have the finance hat. We've got the production hat, the execution hat. There's a lot of things we need to do. We watch the numbers very closely. They matter. The numbers matter. And we also have the leadership hat. We have the people hat. We have the culture hat. It matters. And before I'm done here, I want to help you realize, help you think, help you understand that there are metrics on both sides of this. It's both sides is a hard side. There's a hard science. There's a tangibility to both sides. And I simply think it's the moment in time we find ourselves in the development of our understanding of the leadership space. Some years ago, tell you a quick story. I had the opportunity to work with a man, and he has given me permission to name him, and so I will. His name is Serge Chevalier. I remain his friend on Facebook. He's a grandpa now. And Serge was working for an East Coast food wholesale company at that time, doing about $20 billion a year with warehouses and truckers and unions and warehouses and rollers and pickers and work. It's packages up and down the East Coast, wholesale, moving from a food manufacturer out to retail outlets. And Serge had under his management 3 warehouses of 48 in the system that he served. And I met him in a church. I did a series of trainings in a mega church in the Carolinas on serving leadership. And he was a member of that church. He came and he carried the serving leader work back into his company, into his 3 warehouses, and began to implement the behaviors inside the 5 actions of serving leadership, the behaviors inside Run to Great Purpose, so that his people would have a sense of meaning at work. The behaviors inside Raise the Bar, so his people could grow in their ability to make values-aligned decisions, and trust could grow, not only his trust in them, but their trust in him. And the behaviors inside Blaze the Trail, so that they could have a much stronger market and customer focus in everything they did. The behaviors inside Build on Strength, so that he could be developing his people more and more in alignment with their motivated ability and build great teams that were well-rounded. And the behaviors inside Up in the Pyramid, so that he could teach the people inside his warehouses how to more effectively delegate, and equip and empower and grow people into more responsibility in alignment with vision and mission and values. He did this in his 3 warehouses. And about 15 months later, he got a call from corporate. Now, corporate didn't have any commitment to be a nice company, and I'm not asking for that. Corporate was focused on what they would have thought of as the hard side of business. Getting product out the door and delivering it and cutting costs and reducing damage and making sure that, they're increasing market share and all of that. That's what corporate was doing. And they had their eyes on the metrics, which I deeply appreciate. They were blind to the soft side of leadership. I don't mind that they were. They were driven by the hard side of leadership and the metrics. I think that's an asset. And they called him 15 months in, and in more colorful language, asked him, "What are you doing?" And he said, I'm doing this servant leader thing in my warehouses. And he might have been speaking Greek to them. That made no sense. They weren't interested in that. But Serge said, "So you're asking me what I'm doing. You're pleased, aren't you?" Because Serge was looking at the numbers. He says, "Yeah, it's nuts. Your numbers are nuts." Now, numbers are supposed to be over here on the hard side, aren't they? What's our net income per employee? That's a pretty good number to keep track of. What's our turnover rate? What's our, what does it cost us when we lose an employee and have to recruit another one and hire them and train them? Those are numbers. What about damaged product? That's a number. His numbers over here on the hard side were nuts. And they walked him through what they were seeing. And, this is crazy. And he explained what he was doing. What was he doing? He was doing serving leadership, helping people have a sense of meaning, dignity, worth, purpose, helping people build trust, because they knew that, when you said something, you did it. The gap between the say and the do had gotten narrowed, and people came to understand that what Serge stood for with his words, he stood for with his actions, and so forth. That's what he was doing. These behaviors that we learned from great leaders around the world that we taught through the Serving Leader Framework. And at the end of that call, it was essentially, well, whatever that is, keep doing it. I was doing some work more recently for Honda's North American Lean Network. Honda brings together their supplier companies on an annual basis, and I've had the great fun and pleasure and joy of being with that group 3 years with their annual gathering of the supplier companies within Honda's network, teaching serving leadership. And I reached back out a couple of years ago when I was getting ready to go back to an annual gathering of Honda's Lean Network to Serge for an update. And because Serge he's a data guy, the hard side over here, he's a data guy. And let me give you a couple of data points. Number one, 15 months in to the serving leader work in one of his warehouses, the turnover rate had dropped in that warehouse from 7 turnovers a week to 5 turnovers a month. Okay, well, let's say that a month has 4 weeks. We know it has a little bit more than that, but the math is easier. So 28 turnovers a month to 5 a month. It's a little bigger than that. And the cost in the company to lose an employee, to need to find a replacement employee and to train that employee was $6,000. So 28 minus 5, 23 monthly in one warehouse times 6,000, $130,000+ of hard cost. I'm over here on the hard side of leadership, you understand, the important side. $130,000+ a month of savings in the reduction of employee turnover. Why would you get less turnover if you are giving people a sense of meaning and helping them see that their work matters, even if it is detail oriented or there's time constraints on it and what have you, and helping them realize that they can trust you. Why would you get fewer turnovers like that? Well, there's no rocket science involved in this. You know the answer to that question. People leave companies where they don't feel like people. People leave companies where they feel like they're being treated like a machine, and so forth and so on. Now, that doesn't even scratch the surface of what happens when you have an employee stay for a while in terms of increased productivity. This is just hard cost of, the recruiting service to find someone, and then the screening process with HR and the time that is required to do that, and then the orientation and the training. That doesn't even touch the increased productivity and value of an employee who sticks around a while, the training you can add to that employee, the skill that you build, the continuity of good productivity that happens when you've got a loyal employee. I mean, the metrics of $133,000 a month saved doesn't scratch the surface of the impact that just that one metric points to as a product of serving leadership. Let me give you a second data point. 15 months in to the serving leadership work, working with his people, working with his culture, doing these behaviors that produce workplaces of dignity and worth, the cost for handling a package in one of his warehouses had dropped from 25 cents, that was standard and average, to 19 cents. 25 cents package handling cost. What all is in that? Well, package in, repackaged, touched, moved, labeled, put back on the belt, out, put onto the truck, brought back from the truck because someone dropped it, brought back from the truck because it wasn't packed right, it wasn't complete, shipped again, 25 cents a case, handling cost to 19 cents a case. Well, what is that? 6 cents, big deal, times 500,000 cases a month in one warehouse. And the data goes on and on. Serge unpacked it for me. I have the whole case story. Workers' compensation claims went way down. Damaged product, way down. Productivity up. Retention of workers longer term, the average length of employment up, and on and on. How did his numbers go through the roof and catch the attention of corporate? Because people were showing up differently, because people were bringing more than was required. You can watch this. I've watched this in companies around the world. Let's say you are a company with 100 employees or 1,000 employees. I was looking some years back at the data inside a global aluminum company with hundreds of thousands of employees. When you build the conviction inside your workforce among your people that, this is a good place to work, actually. This is a place that cares for me, actually. This is a place where I feel like a human being, actually. When you build that, what is that impact? If, a certain percentage of your workers, out of all of your workers, lift their heads a little higher, pay attention a little more, go the second mile a little extra, what is the incremental impact of more and more people doing more and more, catching mistakes sooner, fixing them without being told, showing up better in front of the customer? Soft side of leadership? It's not soft. It is potent. It's part of the equation. In no wise is it my opinion that leadership is the only thing that matters in business. It isn't. How we treat people, how we build culture is one of the things that matters. Many things matter. The hats we wear are all important hats. But we need to transform our thinking in and around the essentialness of getting better in our leadership craft to the core work of getting better in our business. It's not every now and then if I have a little extra time, I'll do it. It's not one of those. If you go out into the production facility of, let's say, a furniture manufacturing company, and they have a system for making sure that the CNC machines are serviced once a week. or the saws have blades change, every 4 hours or whatever it is. You don't hear those people saying, well, if we think of it, we'll do that too. But we're really busy this week. We have a lot of productivity we have to get done this week, so we're not going to change the blades this week. You never hear that kind of talk because it's not sensible. And so it is not my conviction that becoming better leaders and learning the skills of developing a high-performance culture is the only thing that matters or the most important thing that matters. It is one of the things that matters. And we need to move it away from this fuzzy-headed thinking about it's an occasional thing that's nice to do and move it over here into, no, it's actually an essential thing to do. I don't have any criticism of leaders who aren't clear about this. In fact, it's quite obvious to me that a lot of things that are done in leadership development are actually not helpful. The inspirational program that you do once a year to try to make people feel good doesn't have a metric attached to it, isn't clear about the exact thing you're doing that impacts productivity. I walk into groups of engineers in large manufacturing facilities. I'll be very specific here. I walked in a number of years ago to a room of 100 engineers, senior vice presidents and plant managers for Progress Rail, the rail division of Caterpillar, brought in by the CEO who really loved this work. And when I walked into that room of 100 engineers, and these are hard side of leadership guys, I saw eyes roll. Like, oh boy, what did the CEO set up for us today? We're going to have to listen to this leadership guy talk about leadership, but it's going to be a waste of our time, and it's going to be some inspirational thing, but we got work to do. I don't mind that. I actually respect that. People who are accountable for their time, for their resources, for where they invest themselves, who are thoughtful and conscientious, want to have a return on investment of their time. And whenever I see those eyes roll, I know that they have been dragged through exercises that were not useful. And what that tells me is they're astute. They know that their time matters, and they are astute enough to know when their time is being wasted. I respect that. This never bothers me. Frankly, I like people who expect that there will be a return on their investment. That's a conscientiousness that I have a great deal of appreciation for. So I'm not critical at all of the sense of dubiousness that often greets me when I'm talking with someone about leadership. Man, that sounds good, but this year I got to do the important stuff. I'm not critical of that. I get it. I read a book a couple of years ago that disgusted me. It was well written. It was written by Barbara Kellerman, who ranking leader in the leadership industry out of Harvard. The book is called The End of Leadership, and I won't unpack for you what disgusted me about the book. I've written about it. I won't unpack that. But what Barbara Kellerman said in her evaluation of the leadership development industry, over here, the soft side stuff that a lot of metric-driven, data-driven leaders don't respect, is that the leadership development industry, in spite of doing about $12 billion of work on an annual basis, the leadership development industry, she's the queen of it and the master of it. The leadership development industry, she said, is entirely non-accountable for outcomes. She was criticizing our industry, her industry, my industry. She was criticizing it, and I agree with that part of her book. I have seen amazing things done to no avail. I watched a project right in my home city of Pittsburgh a number of years ago. I won't name the giant consulting firm that came in and was paid $250 million to do a leadership initiative, and 3 years later, it was reported in my city newspaper that there had been no results. So I'm not critical of eye rolls. I'm not. I am not critical of data-driven people who are skeptical of the so-called soft side. What it tells me is that what's being done in the name of leadership is often divorced from actual behaviors that increase productivity and that drive performance. And why would we spend money or time on those things? Yeah, they're inspirational or they're fluffy, or maybe they're just informational and we sit in a room for a day hearing a bunch of stuff we already know, but not getting practical applicational things that we can go back and implement that will move the needle. What we've been doing for 25 years is watching the data. So picture it this way. On the left-hand side of a chart, and we watch this very carefully, we look at the behaviors that we have benchmarked globally of the practices of effective leaders. This isn't rocket science stuff. This is simple stuff that matters. Simple, doable, doesn't take much time, but you got to do it, and you got to do it, and you got to do it. We've been mapping the behaviors that always show up in the leadership and management practice in organizations that perform well. And we call those the 5 actions of serving leadership. Run to great purpose, raise the bar, blaze the trail, build on strength, upend the pyramid. And we've got 3 little practices inside each of those 5 that we benchmarked. We didn't invent these. We learned these by watching many, many companies around the world that perform well and seeing that they were implementing these practices. To the right of that left-hand column that is behavior, leadership behavior that we need to get better at, we benchmark the characteristics of a high-performance culture. I've talked about this again and again, farmer, soil, crop. So leader behavior, culture characteristic. And inside those, we identify everyone understands why their work matters. That's a character quality of a high-performance culture. Everyone understands why their work matters. The behaviors inside run to great purpose feed that, produce that, so that when the leader has an understanding of the meaning of the work, the follower then comes to understand why their work matters. Everyone understands why their work matters. Values, number 2, are practiced everywhere in the organization. Number 3, everything we do is focused on delivering value to the customers we serve. Number 4, people's roles match up with their strength and their capability and their motivation. And number 5, individuals and teams are increasingly able to make decisions and take actions without requiring tight managerial oversight. Each of the leadership behaviors that we teach fuels and strengthens and increases the culture characteristics that are correlated with high performance. And then move further to the right, then we can track organizational benefits that accrue to the company that gets better over here on the leadership practice. They're better at recruiting. They're better in the so-called war for talent. They're better at retention. They're better at reducing risk and damage and mistakes and so forth and so on. And all the way over to the right side of that chart are key performance indicators. Back to the hard side of business, aren't we? Metrics that matter. And we map these. What is the turnover rate? What is the retention rate? What is the engagement, the employee engagement level? In healthcare, what are the HCAP scores that are so important in terms of patient experience? What is the net income per employee and how has it shifted because we're practicing leadership better? Not just because we got, a new machine in that does better work, that matters, but because we upgraded the supervisory practice to get human beings to be more productive and devoted and attentive. These metrics matter. And the point of my sharing here today is that we need a much more metric-driven, aligned, attentive view of leadership development. than we have historically had. We need to expect, and I would urge you to expect, that when you invest money, and far more precious than money, time, in leadership development for yourself and your people, you should expect outcomes from that. Somebody who cannot explain to you how this time is going to directly impact the key organizational elements of your enterprise that improves metrics that matter to you doesn't understand what leadership is, doesn't understand the work that needs to be done. Perhaps has a nice program with bullet points on PowerPoints and maybe a little excursion outside to do fun stuff. Not bad stuff, that's fine. But leadership development needs to be held accountable to organizational outcomes and improvement. And it's sensible, isn't it? If I am behaving properly as a leader, if someone shows me what I need to do and I do it, I should expect that it impacts my people. It impacts their desire to come to work in the morning. It impacts their readiness to be part of my team longer term. It impacts their readiness to raise their hand and take on more responsibility. It impacts the way they think. It impacts what they volunteer above and beyond what they have to volunteer, because they are part of something that matters. They're part of something that cares for them. They're part of something that gives them a place to grow and develop in the world. So I want you to think about this. I've been watching for 25 years as the leadership development industry, this industry I belong to, and often feel like an oddball within. I've been watching the early signs of the realization that there are actual accountability metrics that need to be applied to our leadership practice. I've been preaching this sermon for a long time, watching the data, mapping both in leadership practice and in organizational culture, assessing leadership practice, assessing organizational culture, watching the improvement of that leadership practice measurably, watching the improvement of that organizational culture measurably, and then watching the key performance indicators from a business, a hard-nosed business side, because I don't want time and money to be wasted. Life is short. We get older, and the older we get, the more we realize money's not the issue. Having a job is not the issue. We want to make a difference. We want to leave the world a better place. And this is why you're in business. This is why you're taking on the burdens of organizational leadership. You want to grow and develop and improve the things that are done under your leadership that are positive in the world. And I want to encourage you to think about the leadership side of that with the same hard-nosed discipline and accountability and expectation as you do everything else that you do in business. So be encouraged. This journey is long. We aren't born good leaders. It's a growing up process. I want to encourage you to hang in there, to lean in, to expect much, to reach out, to receive the help that you need, to grow, and to know that it matters so much that you're in the role that you hold, the impact that you make for your people and for the customers you serve and for the world is worth it. I want to encourage you in your leadership growth.
For more information about the Center for Serving Leadership, visit our website at centerforservingleadership.com.